Alright, welcome back to the channel everyone. As you can see from the title, today I'm ranking the top 5 NBA 2Ks of all time in my opinion. And I already know this is one of those topics where people have very strong opinions, so just keep in mind, this is my list and my personal bias is definitely a huge factor that goes into my own rankings. Before we actually get into the list, I want to give my quick thoughts on 2K as a game overall. We all know the glaring issues that show up year after year. I'm not even going to get into how 2K basically has a monopoly on basketball games, which lets them get pretty greedy with microtransactions and grinding mechanics that are within their games. That said, at its core, even when a specific year is bad, like 2K21, 2K is still a really fun game to play with friends. Some of my funniest and most memorable gaming moments ever have come from playing Park in 2K, or even my team in the years where I actually locked in and played it. If you've ever stayed up way too late running Park games with your boys, you already know exactly what I'm talking about. So, the criteria for this ranking is pretty simple: overall enjoyment and how much fun I personally had with the game. I'm also including 2Ks that I've actually played, which means some absolute classics like 2K15 and 2K16 won't be on the list, as my first 2K was 2K17. And with that being said, let's start this list at number 5.
Yes! Say! Good go, baby. That's $5,000 secured. Thank you. Step back.
Where do I even start with NBA 2K20? This is actually a really interesting game for me because I almost didn't include it on this list at all. There's a pretty big consensus in the 2K community that 2K20 is a lot of people's favorite 2K and that it's one of the greatest. But for me personally, while I did have a lot of funny and enjoyable moments on this game, most of that didn't come from the game itself. It came from being in quarantine and having all my friends on online at the same time. This was the era of non-stop park streaks, party chats every night, and nobody really having anything better to do with their time. And that's one of the main reasons I don't really rate this game as highly as some of my other favorite 2Ks. People tend to forget the actual state of the game, especially before the pandemic even started. For starters, 2K20 felt like a watered down version of the previous year. The neighborhood was literally the exact same as 2K19, which was a pretty lazy decision on 2K's part. The builder, in my opinion, was also worse than 2K19's. While it did give you more viable builds overall, it also introduced some insanely overpowered ones that made the game really obnoxious to play at times. And a lot of that came down to the gameplay itself. I don't know why people forget this, but 2K20 felt noticeably more sluggish than 2K19, and the gameplay was way more inconsistent, especially when it came to shooting. A lot fewer whites went in on 2K20, which people might actually like, but personally I didn't. To me, this just made the game less fun. On top of that, I didn't really like the decision to let builds with around a 63-pointer consistently hit threes. It did add a lot more build diversity, but I think it went a little too far, especially when you had builds like the two-way slashing playmaker completely running the park, especially on the twos court. So yeah, overall, 2K20 was honestly not a great game to me, even though it made the list. It's here purely because of the memories I had on it, not because I think it was actually that good of a 2K. If this game didn't come out during quarantine, I honestly don't think it would be remembered in the same way. And now I'll move on to number 4 on my list.
Hey!
Oh my god.
I'm gonna scream on every dunk, Chad. I apologize.
Depending on your thoughts on this year's current NBA 2K, you might be a little surprised to see it ranked at number 4 on my list. And don't get me wrong, this game is far from perfect, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend that it is. Aside from the gameplay itself, which I'll get into, NBA 2K26 is easily the worst 2K we've had when it comes to cheaters. Park is borderline unplayable at times because it feels like every other game you're running into someone using a Zen. On top of that, there's SBMM that was introduced in NBA 2K25, which I don't really like. I understand why SBMM exists in games like Call of Duty, but for a game like 2K, which is already pretty basic and accessible, I just don't really see the point of having it in the game. You really notice it while you're solo queuing in the rec. Half the time, it feels like I'm playing against Prime Golden State, while my teammates are straight out of an actual rec league. With that said, putting those issues aside and the general problems that come with every 2K as a franchise, I genuinely think they did a pretty good job with this entry. From a gameplay perspective, I really like how dribbling feels, how shooting works, and how fast the game plays overall. To me, a good 2K should feel fluid and have some pace to it, and that's exactly how this game feels. I know a lot of people complain about how easy shooting is this year, but honestly, I don't mind it at all, and I actually prefer it. I don't really think the skill gap in 2K comes from perfectly timing your jump shot, especially when there are so many other factors that affect shooting, like the game's honestly terrible latency. My only big gameplay complaint really comes on the defensive end. On ball defense could be a bit more physical because at times it feels like players just glide past you. In a fast paced 2K like this, that can be really frustrating. Steals are also pretty underwhelming as well, in my opinion. There are times where I feel like I should be getting a blitz animation and it just doesn't happen. The builder, though, is something I really enjoy this year, and I genuinely think this is the best system we've ever had in any 2K. It gives players a ton of freedom while still doing a pretty good job balancing things through systems like the badge requirements. It's not perfect, and there are definitely attributes that feel undervalued or straight up useless, like strength on most builds, but overall, I think it's a big win. Cap breakers are another feature I really like and think should be a staple moving forward. They have made certain builds, such as the 6-8 builds, pretty overpowered by letting playmaking cap breakers get absolutely juiced, but that's not exclusive to just one build height. It's a system that everyone can take advantage of no matter what build you make. I also like how cap breakers are spread out across the game and aren't just tied to one system, such as rep or the lifetime challenges or whatever. Even casual players can eventually earn 5, and if you actually put time into the game, getting 10 or more is very doable. My only gripe with the cap breakers has to do with the build specialization. I think it's a great concept in theory and something I actually like, but it is way too grindy in its current state. Even for someone like me, who plays a decent amount, if I didn't deliberately go for it while playing offline modes, I honestly don't think I would have ever unlocked it. I went with playmaking, and the number of assists you need is absolutely ridiculous. And I hope next year they can cut that requirement down by at least half. So overall, I think NBA 2K26 is a fundamentally solid game. And honestly, if this exact game had come out a few years ago while I was still in high school, it would have easily been ranked a lot higher on my list. And now we break into the 2Ks that I have as my top 3 of all time.
And he gambled. And I'm pulling from it.
Alright, NBA 2K17. This is considered by most to be probably the last NBA 2K part of that golden generation of games. This was the last 2K for a lot of people that was really fun, and it was honestly just absolutely broken and pure cheese. I'll admit, I don't really have that much to say about this game from a gameplay perspective or what the main issues really were, but every time I look back at it, I look back at it fondly, as it was my first ever 2K, and everyone knows that your first 2K is always going to be the best thing. This game was the first 2K to have the archetype builder system, and I think it was pretty good looking back at it. The thing about this game's builder was when you chose a specialty, you were absolutely godlike at it. The sharps were crazy, the playmakers and point forwards could dribble for the entire shot clock, and the slashers were dunking on whoever was in the paint. I was young, so I didn't really know a lot about the specific details on how to max out your build and all the best animations, so I was literally rocking a 6 foot sharpshooter with max strength and minimal ball handle because I wanted to be strong, I guess, and I don't even know what I was doing. However, even with a lackluster build, this game just still hit different for me. The feeling of getting your grand badge and getting Hall of Fame badges actually felt rewarding, unlike current 2Ks, where the build grind feels like a total drag. It's most likely nostalgia and because it was my first 2K, but the grind didn't seem nearly as bad for this year. One thing that I know is not just the nostalgia talking and is an objective fact is how good the dribbling really was in this 2K. Even when you watch back old gameplay of Park, the dribbling is really quick and it seems like there's no restrictions in the directions you want to go or anything like that. I even think if you're not a dribble head and you want the game to be more realistic, you can even admit that having games with better dribbling make the gameplay more fun, and dribbling reached its peak in this game. It's been good in other 2Ks as well, but it never really hit the same feeling as it did in NBA 2K17. Overall, if I was a little older when this 2K came out, it'd probably be higher on my list. But with that said, NBA 2K17 will always have a place in my heart as I really look back at it as a really good game, and I did spend a lot of time on it. And now we'll be moving on to number 2 on my list.
Albuquerque foul call.
I know this pick is going to surprise a lot of people in the community, and before you rush to say I'm bugging or whatever, you've got to at least hear me out. NBA 2K22 Next Gen is definitely not perfect, and it has plenty of flaws, but man, this game was fun. For starters, this was the first 2K that actually felt like a true next gen game. After the total flop that was NBA 2K21 Next Gen, playing this honestly felt like a breath of fresh air. The game looked great, and having 4 solid parks with 4 affiliations was a huge W. In my opinion, this was the last 2K that actually had a good park mode before it turned into a complete sweat fest. There was no theater mode yet, so unless you were running fives, park was really your only option for twos and threes, and I actually missed that a lot. In current 2Ks, especially 2K26, Park doesn't really give that option anymore. It's either filled with sweats or straight up Zenners, so just hopping on and chilling almost never happens. What really had me hooked on this game, similar to my reasons for liking 2K26, was the gameplay. 2K22's gameplay philosophy just resonated with me. It was fast, fluid, and let you do fun stuff on the court. I'll admit, it wasn't super hard to be above average at this game, but that's exactly what made it enjoyable for me. The shooting was absolutely cracked. If you were open, the shot was pretty much going in, white or green, and honestly, I didn't mind that at all. Fades were broken like they've been in most next gen 2Ks. My favorite part of the shooting was the step backs and hop shots. Every 2K technically lets you do these moves and they will go in, but this game actually lets you hit them consistently. It allowed you to create space in different ways instead of just backing up out of an ISO every time. And speaking of ISO, the dribbling in this game was also really fun. It didn't quite hit like 2K17, but it still let you move really well on taller builds, which is something I personally enjoy. There weren't a ton of restrictions on the dribbling, and if you've been listening to this list, you already know that's something I value a lot. I put a ton of hours into this game because of the gameplay, but an underrated feature of 2K22 was the builder. In my opinion, this builder, along with 2K26's, is the absolute best the franchise has seen. It gives you complete freedom to make almost any build you want. The difference, and the reason I give 22 the slight edge, is that every height feels viable, and it actually has a role on the court, depending on how you make the build. I remember when the game first came out, Laker fan, who's one of the best 2K creators, made a video talking about this exact thing. There were so many viable builds, and this was honestly the last 2K where you'd see people running genuinely different builds instead of everyone copying the same meta. Obviously, stage was the stage and people had the meta builds there, but for Park and Rec, variety actually existed. I'll admit, the build glitch played a pretty big role in how good this builder became, and you either loved it or hated it. Personally, I loved it, especially because it was found halfway through the year, and honestly felt like we got a whole 2K22.5 update. It completely changed how builds were made and what they could do. It introduced those 6'8 and 6'9 demigods, which I know some people hated, but for me it made the game even more fun, especially since I could finally run a 6'7 point guard. I honestly think this game gets overlooked by the community a lot. We were coming off what might have been the worst 2K of all time, and the player base was still split between old gen and next gen. But for me, this game was just pure fun, and that's what every 2K should be. You can argue that the offense and shooting were a little OD, but to me, that's part of what makes a 2K great. And the crazy part is, the next game on this list checks almost every single box I look for in a 2K. And with that, we'll go into number 1.
Hit me!
No.
Bro, I literally was in the process of AJ!
Coming off what was at the time the worst 2K ever, NBA 2K18, 2K19 had a huge hill to climb in terms of expectations. And honestly, somehow it actually met them, depending on who you ask. 2K18 was clunky and filled with way too many canned animations, like the cheese snatchback that made every game feel awful to play. 2K19 fixed pretty much all of that and addressed almost every major issue the previous game had. Builder improved, gameplay improved, and Park much improved compared to the neighborhood that was in 2K18. Pretty much everything you can think of was better in this game compared to the previous year. Starting with the gameplay, which has kind of become a theme in this video, 2K19 was just a fun ass game, and easily the most fun I've ever had on any 2K. From broken sharps to cheesy lockdowns to a completely busted contest system, this game was far from perfect, but that's exactly what made it fun. Everybody knew how broken the game was. I was raging on it almost every night. And yet, none of that stopped us from playing. The game allowed every playstyle to flourish, because honestly, every build was broken in its own way. Dribbling was probably the second best it's ever been behind 2K17, shooting was busted, post scorers were insane, and you had lock screening half court shots with a 63 ball like it was nothing. What really took this game to another level for me was the builder. Compared to 2K18, it allowed for way more combinations and gave builds clear strengths and weaknesses. I remember running a slashing shot creator that was decent at everything, but not elite at any one thing, and that balance actually felt right. The builder let you make pretty much any build you wanted, without completely breaking the game. There were still clear meta builds like stretch bigs and pure locks, but everything had a counter. My only real gripe with the builder was how attribute cap breakers were distributed. In both 2K18 and 2K19, when you unlocked more attributes, the game chose where you could apply them. Depending on your height, wingspan, and position, that could delay you from maxing out what you actually wanted, which limited build flexibility early on in this game. Another huge reason this is my favorite 2K of all time was the community during this year. You can honestly argue that 2K19 was one of the peaks of the 2K community. We had creators like Agent Zero, Ticino, and the rise of Joe Knows all putting out elite content. Especially Agent, he was really the lifeblood of the community at this time. If you weren't watching his videos, you were missing out. This was also when wagers really started popping off, which got a lot of people hyped and competitive. And Park was always packed as well. Outside of 2K20 during quarantine, Park had never really felt alive again. It was solid in 2K22 in my opinion, but it still didn't hit like the way it did in 2K19. NBA 2K19 is also my most played 2K by far, and it'll always be my favorite. From broken mechanics to the cheesy greens right in people's faces, this game is my number one, no question. So that pretty much wraps it up for my top 5 NBA 2Ks of all time. Let me know if you agree with the list or if you think I'm completely tripping, because I already know this one's going to be a little controversial to some people. Drop your own top 5 in the comments, because I'm genuinely curious to see what everyone stands and what you think the best 2K is. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. I appreciate everyone who stuck around to the end, and yeah, I'll catch you guys in the next one. See ya.